Shalom and good afternoon. I did found Promega about 34 years ago. My training is in biology and chemistry. Professionally, I do manage this business, but I have a very strong personal interest in ideas and research that explores the frontiers of science regarding the mind, brain, and notions of reality and world that is within us and also outside. And I want to talk about how this perspective can perhaps inform us a bit on the future of medicine. And thanks very much again, Mona, for this opportunity to share a few of these ideas. Our business in the past 34 years has been focused on molecular tools used in studying and bringing better mechanisms and methods to the scientific community, which obviously has implications in healthcare and in human diagnosis. I want to take just the remaining time to create a perspective that's perhaps a bit different and gets us a bit out there, but I'll bring it back in just a moment. So a very long time ago, in fact, it was about 14 billion years ago, there was really nothing. There was nothing there. And then there was a quantum fluctuation in the midst of no time and no space. And then, about 400,000 years later, the universe very rapidly inflated, resulting in this thing that we call the universe. And at first there was just hydrogen and helium, and these two elements condensed into billions of large local balls of superdense matter, in which the fusion reactions occurred and stars were born. And elements only up to iron were made in these reactions. And then 5 to 6 billion years ago, one of the stars began to run out of fuel. It expanded to a red giant and then collapsed on itself and exploded in a supernova. And in the supernova, like billions that have occurred elsewhere in our universe, all the other elements were created. And from the death of these stars, the elements of life were created. So planets were born. Life appeared on our planet about 3.5 billion years ago, becoming more diverse, more organized. And eventually, neuronal sensors tapped into the environment, enabling growth, reproduction, energy uptake. These neurons continue to multiply and organize, culminating in a remarkable organ that sits on top of our skeletal frame, directing, deciding, and contemplating. So 100 billion neurons, and altogether about 100 trillion neuronal connections working in exquisite coordination, ultimately turning inward to ask the question, who am I, what am I doing here, and by the way, what's going on out there? So the universe has become, in a way, self-aware through itself and through each of us that are here today. And I'm going to come back to this point in just a moment. So the question that's being asked today is predicting how healthcare and life sciences that we study can support medical research. And these predictions are pretty tricky. And as Kahneman said in his talk earlier this morning, the forecasts are often mistaken because of one hidden assumption, and that assumption is that tomorrow will be more or less similar than what we have today. So we tend to kind of build on what we know and then extrapolate that into the future. That's about the best that we can do. And of course, the problem with that is that the knowledge that we build on is expanding exponentially. All of the information, all the technology is increasing at an ever more rapid rate. So it gets more and more difficult to actually predict what's going to be happening into the future. We might consider that the beginning of the age of molecular medicine kind of came about when we understood the basic structures within the cells, DNA molecules, discovery of codons, roles of genes, proteins, and the intricacies of cell signaling. And of course, we look at that and we take a lot of pride, in what we've learned through that. But I just want to remind us that we occasionally have to step back and look at this with a certain amount of humility. And a Nature magazine article that was published just last month, a number of scientists, there were about 300 scientists from, I think, about 14 countries, published work on their outcome of the work regarding the chromosomes in tomatoes. 35,000 genes in a tomato. Well, let's go back to 1969. And in 1969, it was thought that there were about 2 million genes in the human. By about 1990, it was thought, well, based on research that they had done, this actually came down to about 125,000 genes. And then just a few years ago, that number came down even further, surprisingly, to about 25,000 genes. So I think we have to have a lot more respect for this tomato. 35,000 genes in the tomato, 25,000 genes in the human. And that would have been very surprising had we suddenly forecasted that 20, 30 years ago. Well, we know today that there are a lot of reasons for why that happens. And as we study and understand more and more of the mechanisms, as was mentioned earlier about these microRNAs, we also understand in humans and in higher life forms, there are a large number of intricacies that we just couldn't even imagine just 20, 30 years ago. And again, this is how quickly things are changing, how quickly our perspectives are changing. So what are the implications for the future of medicine? And again, going back to my original slide that shows the human brain. Keep in mind that in the human, a very large number of genes are directly associated with the nervous system. So regarding today's topic, I'd like to just mention one factor that can have an enormous impact on our health, and that is stress. Stress is a fact of nature. These are forces inside of us, outside of us, that affect ourselves, individuals. And the way that we respond to stress can have an enormous impact on our health. Because of the overabundance of stress in our modern lives, we usually think of stress as being negative, but in fact, from a biological point of view, it can be negative, neutral, or positive. Stress is just one factor among many that are induced and managed in some fashion by the human brain, by our state of consciousness, and how that impacts our health. So if you just think about all the number of things that can be impacted on our health by this idea of stress: headache, muscle tension, pain, chest pain, fatigue, stomach upset, sleep problems, depression, a whole variety of things. You can list pages of things that can result from stress. And if you think about it, stress itself is something that we create from how we respond to our environment. We treat many of the downstream symptoms, but I'd like us to consider our state of mind and how we respond to things and how that can dramatically impact on our state of health. So managing stress then, by changing our perspectives and our outlook, in effect, by changing our minds, can have a direct and lasting impact on the body's response, minimizing the negative impact of stress in many ways. In summary, changing the state of mind directly affects our health and can affect our treatment options. I think the next several decades will give us profound discoveries that will continue to link our well-being and our state of mind. So in the same way that quantum physicists were really astounded and somewhat dismayed to learn that a conscious observer influences the outcomes of what they thought were purely objective experiments, I think we too will discover profound power within human thought, mindfulness, and consciousness on every aspect of our health. Thank you.